Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. This lecture is on simple workflow service, and this is a super short lecture because basically all you need to know is what SWF is, where it's used, and basically its use cases versus SQS, and that's what you're going to be quizzed on in your exam. They'll give you a scenario and you basically have to choose whether or not you're going to be using SQS or SWF. So what is SWF? SWF stands for Amazon Simple Workflow Service, and it's a web service that makes it easy to coordinate work across distributed application components. So it's a way of coordinating work across a whole bunch of different components within your application. And SWF enables applications for a wide range of use cases, including media processing, web application backends, business process workflows, analytic pipelines, and it's basically used to be designed as a coordination of tasks. And task represents invocation of various processing steps in an application which can be performed by executable code, web service calls, human interactions, and scripts. So what does that actually mean? Well, SWF is a way of coordinating both your applications as well as with human beings, as well as with manual processes. And where is this typically used? Well, Amazon actually use it themselves inside their warehouse. So when you go to Amazon.com and you order a book, that's going to be executed by code. And then you go and do your payment. Again, that's going to be a series of algorithms that go through and take the money from your credit card. However, when the actual order comes in, somebody in the warehouse has to go and find that order. They then have to walk it to a packing station, and then they basically apply an address label to it, put it in a box, and then post it off to you. And so this is a human interaction. So that's where the human element gets involved. And so SWF is a way of basically combining your digital environment along with manual tasks, along with human beings. So whenever you see SWF, just remember how Amazon use it themselves. They use it inside a warehouse. And that's not the only example of where you could use it, but that is definitely a most memorable way of remembering how SWF is used. So if you've got a scenario-based question where it's talking about, you've got a human element to it, and you need to choose a particular service, well, you're not going to be using SQS because humans can't really go and poll the SQS queue. I suppose you could do if you were like an EC2 instance, or you could get an EC2 instance to do it, but that doesn't really involve any human interaction. If it involves any kind of human interaction or any kind of manual process, then you're going to be using SWF. And that's all you really need to know about SWF for the exam. I've taken a couple of exams recently and I haven't seen it on there, but it has been on there quite heavily in the last 3 or 4 years. So it may still be an exam topic, it may not. Just remember that you basically just need to know the difference between SWF and SQS. So SQS has a retention period of 14 days, and with SWF, the workflow executions can last up to 1 year. So just imagine ordering a book on Amazon and it's taking 1 year to arrive. Amazon SWF presents a task-orientated API, whereas Amazon SQS offers a message-orientated API. So again, if you see a scenario-based question where it's talking about a task, think of SWF. If you see a scenario-based question that talks about loosely decoupling your architecture, then that's going to be SQS. SWF ensures that a task is assigned only once and is never duplicated. With SQS, you need to be able to handle duplicated messages. Certainly if you're just using default SQS queues, ignore the FIFO for now. And may also need to ensure that a message is processed only once. And then SWF keeps track of all the tasks and events in an application. And with SQS, you need to implement your own application level tracking, especially if your applications use multiple queues. So that's the main difference between SWF and SQS. Again, I haven't seen it in the last 2 exams that I've taken, but it could still be on there. It certainly has been on there for the last 4 or 5 years. So just understand the difference between them. Also remember what SWF actors are. So essentially they're composed of 2 different things. We've got our workflow starters, and this is an application that can initiate or start a workflow. So maybe it's when you've ordered a book on Amazon.com. It could be your e-commerce website following the placement of an order, or a mobile app searching for bus times. And then you've got your deciders, and this basically controls the flow of the activity tasks in a workflow execution. And if something is finished or failed in a workflow, a decider decides what to to do next. And then you have your activity workers, and these are basically the workers that go in and carry out the activity tasks. Again, like I said, this hasn't really come up in the last 2 exams that I've done, but historically you have had to know what SWF is. If you see anything mentioning workflow starters, deciders, or activity workers, again, think SWF. But if it's SQS, if it's about messaging, then you want SQS in the scenario-based questions. So that is it for this lecture, everyone. Like I said, very, very quick. You don't need any hands-on experience with it. You just need to understand the difference between SWF and SQS. In the next lecture, we're going to look at SNS, and we're going to just look at the overall theory. We set up SNS when we set up our billing alerts. So you have seen it in action before. And we are going to see it in action when we go and build our serverless website in the next section of the course. So if you've got the time, please join me in the next lecture. Thank you.